Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Keeping It Real with America's Supermom. I'm excited. I have a new guest. We got connected on LinkedIn. And so I'm really excited to have a conversation today with Katrina. But before we get into some great conversation, getting to know one another, I want to give her the opportunity to say a few words.
Hi, my few words are hi. I'm Katrina Stroh. I'm a Navy veteran who in 2018 decided to take their own life due to internalizing messages from a toxic work environment. And I am now a people consultant and career coach who is dedicated to providing examples of setting personal boundaries at work and the vocabulary needed to name harm in those spaces.
That is phenomenal. So, first, I want to thank you for your service. And wow, that is a mouthful. So thinking about that moment in time, you brought it up. We're just going to go right there. What was it that was going on that you felt there was no other option?
So a lot of the messages that I was getting from my direct leadership, specifically, this is a quote from them, like, "You're not earning your paycheck." They asked me to list out all of my medical conditions and appointments so that they could track where I was going because they felt I wasn't earning my paycheck. After several conversations like that, I just felt like, wow, I'm not a good employee. I must not be a good person. I probably don't deserve to continue on.
Wow. Now, and so, how long was this phase going on? And I think in dealing with my own struggle with depression, which is something different than what you experience, I'm not trying to say it's the same, but I was in this place where I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody. I was always doing this, doing that, trying to kind of avoid some of the stuff that was going on in my own head. So what was that like for you? Did you feel like were people reaching out to you, or were you just going into isolation? What was happening?
I think I had never had those thoughts before, so I thought they were normal. I thought this was a course of
Mm,
action. And the organization that I was a part of was just fueling that on with their messages as well. So every time I would reach out to somebody in the organization, they would say, "Okay, well, that's neither here nor there. Keep it pushing. We have things to do."
mm.
So to anybody out there that may be getting those messages, it is here and there. We do not have other things to do. This should take priority.
Right. I love that. And, just not being heard,
Mhm.
so I think there's a lot of people during this time, that may be watching that it's like, the life that they thought that they had, together is now just riddled with so much uncertainty from,
Mhm.
the weather to this virus, and then their job industries
Mhm.
changing because of the pandemic and the aftermath. It's kind of like the
Mhm.
aftershocks of this earthquake. We're feeling it with this pandemic in different areas. So, what advice would you give them about being in a place where they feel like, they're having things change and they're not familiar with this, in a way that they can just learn from what you experience? What advice would you give them so that they might be able to take a different route?
So one of the first steps I had to do was build a support system. And
Mhm.
that support system was full of people that could actually hear me. The people in my
Mm.
organization did not want to hear me, but the support
Mhm.
system that I built, which included a therapist, a psychiatrist, and other people around me that wanted to see me continue to live my life and be the person I was
Mhm.
before. That's what that support system needs to look like. They need to be supportive and they need to be able to hear you.
I love that. And, I love the fact that it takes a team.
Mhm.
That's one of the things people ask me. They're like, man, you're connected to so many people. And it's like, hey, I need that energy
Mm,
because I can't do it by myself. Now, you said something very key about the person that you were before.
mm.
What was it that happened that kind of got you think, in a space to where it was a good environment for things to change?
Hmm. Got me into the space where it was a good environment for things to change. So after I decided to take my own life, I was hospitalized.
Mhm.
And so the support system was kind of projected onto me. I didn't really have a choice but to live following that
Mm.
because precautions were put in place. But for those of us who may be having those thoughts and are not being hospitalized at this point, um, that decision comes from you. You have to decide
Mhm.
to move forward and to build that support system. We are giving you information today, and I hope you take it forward and move forward with it.
Yeah. So true. And it definitely is a decision. And, you do need a team. And I think really being able to admit that we can be at weak points,
Mhm,
and weak meaning, we're not in a state of really being at our
mhm,
best self for whatever
mhm,
reason. Now, you mentioned the before again, like the person you were before, then you go through this period. What was it that changed from the person you were before that allowed things to change in terms of, like, you've never had these thoughts
mhm,
before, but something happened to kind of like maybe have the environment where it made you a little bit more vulnerable
mhm,
to the things that maybe were being said. What was it maybe for some people who feel like, man, I feel like this came out of nowhere. You know
mm,
what I mean? But were there some kind of warning signs, or did you notice any changes going on with
mhm.
you personally before that point?
Yes. So the word change is key. I had a lot of changes happen at the same time. I just moved
Mm,
to a different state. I just got a new job. I just
mm,
had my first child. A lot of changes happened at the same time, and people around me were not able to assist me in that transition. I had to
mm,
change into a new role. I had to change into a new person to become a parent. And I did
mhm,
not have the support system that I needed to make those transitions. They were there for me
mhm.
when I was at there partying and doing whatever, but they were not there for me when I needed to make that shift.
I love that. And, that's really, on top of being a soldier, you
Mhm,
know, that's part of PTSD, right? And it happens not being a soldier. I learned that through my own journey because they were telling me, well, if you have a new baby, that can be traumatic. If
mhm,
you move, that can be traumatic. If
mhm,
you change locations, I mean, all these things. And I'm thinking, man, I've had like 3 or 4 of these things happen at one time.
mhm,
Okay, over a course of some years. So,
mhm,
I think that's another thing people don't realize how traumatic some of
mhm,
these life experiences can be
mhm,
on us mentally, physically, and emotionally.
mhm,
So now we're where we are today, and you're in a space to where you can give back. You can use that experience to help other people.
mhm.
How were you able to gain the strength to do that? And, for speaking out and helping others?
So because of my own mental health journey, I've always spoken about mental health and I didn't
Mhm.
really see where I fit in that. A lot of mental health is still stigmatized and it's also is that the word? Gate kept.
Mhm.
They don't want other people besides psychiatrists or psychologists talking about mental health. But I love that a lot more people are talking about it. And
Mhm.
my position in that space is around boundaries. I wasn't able to cut myself off from my work. I believed
Mhm.
everything my leadership was telling me instead of saying, oh no, I am not my work. I am my own person. I have my own priorities and values in place. And I want people to be able to say that from the jump when they join organizations because I don't ever want anybody to get to where I got to.
Yeah. Now, do you think some of that is about being a soldier, to where, like, people put demands on you and you just don't question them because of their rank, or, their time served or things like that? Do you think that might be something as well?
So I was a sailor, but yes, that does happen a lot in the military. We are told this person has this title, but it also happens in civilian
Mhm,
organizations as well.
mhm,
Because this person is your manager, allow them to talk to you inappropriately.
mhm,
Allow them to book you for overtime. And that's just not
mhm,
the case. You are a human being and you're in charge of your career and everything about you.
mhm, mhm. I love that, and I think these are kind of some of these unsaid
Mm.
practices that nobody
Mm.
questions, and they just kind of be a norm without
Mm.
really being a standard. You just feel like, well, nobody else is speaking up, so let me just follow along. You know what I mean?
And I've seen that so often. As soon as I got out of the military, I didn't know what to expect in the civilian.
Mhm,
So I took whatever job was thrown at me. Of
mhm,
course, that's whatever job was thrown at me. And it was not the best. And I continued to see specifically women of color be taken advantage of by management
mhm.
and just dismissing gaslight at every single turn.
This is some good stuff, and I love the topic of boundaries
Mm.
because we have the ability to set our own boundaries.
Mhm.
So, what are some things that we can do for somebody who's watching? Maybe they don't have any boundaries. What's a good way to start with incorporating some boundaries in your daily routine?
Mm. So some of the things I do with myself is I do tea times with myself, which is an acronym. I talk about the time that I felt uncomfortable at work, what emotion I felt, and the action that caused that emotion. Well, now the A is also a two-part process, and the second part of the A is accountability. I then say, okay, Katrina, how are we going to prevent that from happening again? Then I had that same conversation with the person that made me feel that emotion. Hey, yesterday when you interrupted me in the meeting, I felt disrespected as hell, and I would like for you not to interrupt me again. If they fly off the handle, or if they gaslight you or dismiss you, then you know, oh, Jim and I are not working no more. Like I'm not never gonna work with you ever again. If you go to Jim's boss and they say, "Well, just leave Jim alone," then you know, oh, this place I cannot set healthy boundaries here. So those are some good
Right.
steps to do.
I love that. I'm an acronym person, so
Mm.
that definitely works for me. And so do you sit down and have tea and then meditate on these things and write them down, or what does that look like?
And that's where tea time came from. I used to just sit with myself and drink black tea and talk
Mhm.
about, okay, why are we feeling like this today? Have we taken on too much? Why don't we feel energetic about the project that we just signed the contract for? What is going on with us today? As soon as I get it on that paper, then I realize, girl, you just crossed your own boundary. You signed that contract and you
Mhm.
did not even want to work with that person. And so having those conversations with ourselves is so important because that's how we start to set expectations for ourselves and others.
I love this. And so I love the fact that you bring up if you had crossed the boundary for yourself.
Mm.
So let's go there because so often we say, you know what, I'm not going to let them talk to me like that, or
Mhm.
I'm not going to do X. And then you do cross that boundary or allow somebody else to. How do we fix it? What is something
Mhm.
that we can do to kind of get us right back on track?
And that's where that accountability comes from. You have to
Mm-hmm.
decide for yourself what accountability looks like to you. So if
Mm-hmm.
I skip my morning walk in the morning, I know that I'm going to have a conversation with myself and say, okay, now you feel like shit because you didn't get to meditate, you didn't get to go for your walk. Do we want to feel like that again? No, we do not. So tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna go do this morning walk. It's just I learned recently that boundaries definitely should have been taught to us as children and in every
Mm-hmm.
grade following. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
something that we're taught as children and every grade following. So it's kind of like talking to yourself as a child because it's something that you haven't incorporated in your life prior.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then just the reflection to really recognize the things you can and can't control.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times we hold this baggage on our shoulders, and it's something we really don't even have the power to change. But
Mm.
when we go through and have this assessment of reflecting, we
Mhm.
can look at it and say, okay, I had a part because of this. I
Mm-hmm.
was listening to somebody on a podcast one time and they said, have you ever noticed that when you have a problem that you're there with the problem? So you could be part of the problem, right? So, I think that accountability piece is so huge because we always want, I can only speak for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
blamed everybody about my depression, right? And some of my kids weren't even born yet because I went through this whole thing 3 times during this whole time span. So, taking that accountability is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that you had to do in order to start getting comfortable with admitting? I think that could be a hard step for people to say, you know what, I did not stand up or I didn't make the decision to do X.
Mm-hmm.
How did we start with that accountability piece?
It's when I kept moving from toxic relationship to toxic relationship. And this is professional and personal. I would
Mm-hmm.
just be like, wow, where are all these bad people coming from? I do not understand. And then
Mm-hmm.
finally my therapist said, have you talked to them about it? Have you told them that you're being taken advantage of or discriminated against? Have you had that conversation? And I was like, well, no, but they should know, right? Like they should know they're being awful people. She's like, they do not know. They have no clue and they don't care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So true. I mean, when people are living their life, they're just living their life. And, I remember part of mine was the people pleasing. And it was like, not wanting conflict. And it's like, why are you allowing them to fully be who they are? But you're walking around here with the mask on and can't breathe, because you're trying to change who you are. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, with a mask on and can't breathe. Oh,
Yeah.
I was meditating the other day and I was like, wow, am I breathing right now? It was the crispest breath of air I've ever had in my life.
Mhm.
This for anybody listening who's like, oh, what are y'all sipping on? We are sipping on boundaries and self-worth.
No, that's right. That is so true. So I'm loving this conversation because I think, it's all about being proactive. So now what are some things that you do in your routine that kind of helps you to maintain this level of consistency and discipline in the area of boundaries, and what other things that really help you stay in the state of mind and peace that you're in today?
Because I have my own business and my own space that I speak freely in, my process looks a lot different. So please don't try to plug and play my process into your life if you're listening to this. But for me, I'm very strict on expectations. If somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I'd like to be brought on as a client or a corporate partner or a sponsor or what have you, I'm like, great. We are going to talk about expectations and what you would like from me. Because just like you said, there are unwritten things that they have in there and they expected me to do all of the above. I don't do that no more. I don't do all of the above. I do what's on the paper. So let's write it down. That's what I do for me.
I love that. And I mean, so people who are in this space where they want to do this in their business, I know I talk to so many people just in networking, and they're like, oh, I love helping people, but then it's hard for them to get a contract written or, ask for what they want because I don't know, for some reason they think that element of helping goes away when it's money exchange or something is documented. So for somebody who's having that struggle, can you explain why it's important to have this process and so that they can move forward and be, better versions of themselves?
Well, one, because you need to eat and you have bills and you have people that need you to continue to sustain yourself. So that's one. And no, that was a really hard pill for me to swallow.
That is so true. I
Yes.
mean, it sounds simple, but yeah. Okay, so I don't want to interrupt, but I'm just like
That's like number one. And number two, you're going to feel the repercussions if you don't. Only you
Mhm.
will. They will take and take and take and take as long as you're willing to give. But
Yeah.
at the end, you're gonna be like, wow, this person is awful. I don't know what's going on. Then you'll be right where I was. Like, I don't know why all these people keep taking from me, because
Yeah.
you are willing to give it all.
So true. And I think, they really don't, I don't know, they just think giving
Mhm.
is different than, when it comes to business, giving means different things to different people. And, when you give, you are just giving your power away a lot of
Mm.
times, right? And it's not until you begin to empower yourself to say, well, this is my value, and you
Mm.
begin to hold yourself accountable. When
Mhm.
you get with somebody else, it helps with so much clarity.
Mm.
Because if someone came to me and said, okay, I need a tech person who can run my, behind the scenes, all my stuff, I'm
Mhm.
like, well, hey, I am not that person. Okay. I can talk and I can distract people and talk to them and
Mhm.
keep them entertained while you're working some stuff behind the scenes, but that's not my thing. But I think when you are clear about what it is
Mhm.
that you do
Mhm.
and what you're bringing to the table, it makes for so much more clarity.
Mhm. And it helps everybody involved. Because imagine if I did the tech stuff, you would have had a
Mhm.
messed up show. If I had said yes to that, you would have been upset with me. And once again, we'd be having this conversation like, oh, what went wrong? When we could have just been clear cut in the beginning. But also, it brings me to resources. I have a whole
Mhm.
list of resources that is available when people reach out to me. Hey, I'd like to talk to you about business coaching. Well, I don't do that. Here's a business coach that you can
Mm.
talk to. She's great. I have already spoken to her. Go ahead. So
Mhm.
it's setting boundaries, but also still helping people.
I love that. And I mean, that is just so true because you're able to know what your zone of genius is, and then you're able to outsource other things. So I love that.
Mhm.
So what do you do to kind of continue to sharpen your own saw, so to speak? What are some
Mm.
things that really help you in that area?
I read a lot. Recently, I have been reading at least 2 books a month. And that came from Zach Nunn. He came on my show and said everybody should be reading at least 5 books a year. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I haven't read a book since Lord. So I just kind of started picking up books and started really, oh, it's not that hard. You can just read a book and learn
Mhm.
more information. So that's one of the things I'm doing now to ensure that I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it.
I love that. And I'm a book junkie. Okay. I collect them all the time. I
Nice.
can't go a place without bringing a book. It's like, look, now I know I can't read all these books at one time. So I have a pen and I'm listening to what your books are that you're reading.
Okay, so one of the books I'm reading right now is called Y'all Hiring. It's by
Oh,
Albert Phillips Jr. It is the
mhm.
Black Teen's Guide to Navigating Employment.
Oh, that's good.
Because I'm a career coach and I'd like to know what different perceptions there are of hiring and the hiring process at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, because it's totally different. I
Mhm.
mean, I have my teens in my household that are getting their first job, and it's like everything's online. You go in there. I had my daughter just yesterday, she had an interview for PetSmart and she got the job, but she got there early and they asked her a couple questions and that was it, it could be another thing with finding good help these days, okay? Because everybody wants to be Instagram famous, right?
Mm.
So I'm like, who's out there applying right now? I mean, our whole economy is totally, I don't know what's going on with it right
Yeah.
now. There's just not a lot of young workers like there used to be. I had one of my daughters, she was a senior in high school and she was a manager at a fast food restaurant, you know, at her senior year in high school. So, I mean, I just remember those type of things were not happening.
Mm.
But it's all because of their labor force. They don't have the same number of workers like they used to. So the ones they have no choice but to promote them and do other things in order to keep that incentive for them to be there.
That sounds good, bad, but it
Yeah.
also sounds like the expectations of the workforce are raised. People don't want to
Hmm.
work for minimum wage anymore. They
Yeah.
don't want to not work remotely. There's a whole panini going on right now, pandemic.
Hmm.
And so they just don't want to be exposed to it.
So true. Yeah. So talk to us about other parents or counselors, some tips that we could implement when it comes to preparing the youth for the job market. What are some things that we should be actively possibly doing to, prepare them more? I love the whole thing about these boundaries that you talk about, but how can we incorporate some of these life skills into helping them with their careers?
So, first and foremost, I would definitely have a pen and paper in hand and write down your expectations, especially before going into that interview, just saying completely to
Mhm.
them, I expect there to be diversity and inclusion if that's what you're about, or I expect there to be mobility and growth in the next 1 to 3
Mhm.
years. If not, I might not be moving it or staying with this organization for that long. Just being very transparent in what you need and expect from the organization. A lot of people are still chastised for job hopping, and that's
Mhm.
okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it has nothing to do with us. If you don't want to be a part of an organization, don't move on. Go
Mhm.
to a better one.
Mhm.
To be a part of abuse, of your own abuse, and recently your own exploitation at work, it's
Mhm.
just not worth living for. So I think
Mhm.
one of the biggest tips I give to people who are just learning about boundaries or just joining the workforce is to definitely be clear on what you're expecting from that role.
Mhm. I love that. And I love how you said your own exploitation. So
Mm.
can you break that down just a little bit? Because that might be something, it's like these hard pills to swallow. I
Mhm.
mean, we just got to break it down so that
Mhm.
people can understand it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So one of the ways that organizations kind of exploit their workers is at the bottom of the job description, it'll say, or other duties required.
Mm.
During the interview, I need you to say, "Oh, I highlighted this. What does this mean? Let's get specific with it." Because if you ask me to mop the floors, I will not. If you ask me to take the
Mhm.
trash out from every single cubicle, I will not. You hired me to be an accountant. So you will
Mhm.
not be a part of that organization's exploitation of yourself. You are there to do X, Y, Z. Outside of that, I need some more money.
Mhm. I love that. And that's just really being able to read the fine print. I mean,
Mm,
that's what I'm hearing you say, because a lot of times we go after these jobs, and if we're not careful, it's out of desperation.
mm,
And so we don't even think to read the fine print. It's like, oh, I got a job interview and I'm going to have an income. And we don't think about these things. And then we end up later on, oh, but you signed this and you
mhm.
agreed to this, and you're kind of stuck.
And even if you do have to do that, if you were laid off during the pandemic and you have to move into a real quick, I need a next paycheck job, just
Hmm.
know in your heart that this isn't where you're going to retire from. Have a
Hmm.
plan of action, get you a career coach or a therapist to create a strategy, and know that your mobility is coming soon.
I love that. So, what is the best way for the audience to get a hold of you? And then let us know your final thoughts, a final piece of advice, or whatever you feel led to share with everybody today.
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm there most days, actually all of the days. And you can find me on my website, www.katrinastroll.com. There's a
Mhm.
contact form there. So if you want to reach out, you can. And my last words would be that you are worthy. It does not matter what
Mm.
you were told before. You are worthy of having expectations. You are worthy of asking people exactly what you need, and you are worthy of everything and anything that you want.
I love that. That's such a great message. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and insight. And I know for those watching that this has definitely been a very, very important conversation. So I want to thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank all of you out there watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Katrina directly. But if you want to leave some questions, comments here, feel free to do so, and we'll be sure to get her that information. But also, if you feel like this conversation was very good and you want to share it with somebody, it doesn't even cost a thing. Just click share and send it out, because this is a conversation that's very important that a lot of people can benefit from. So, with all that being said, we want to thank you guys again for watching. We want you to have a wonderful evening, and we will see you guys all on the next episode. Bye for now.